As Barlow's troops were stepping off into the lead-laden hell of the Mule Shoe, another drama was being played out in Georgia. On May 12th, General Joe Johnston was holding the infantry corps of Hardee and Hood at Dalton and waiting for a blue host to assault his position. He later wrote that,
"I elected to remain passive in my fortifications because I'd hoped to draw the Union forces into an attack on my position. I also knew that the rail lines and the roads east of Rocky Face Ridge would enable me to move to Reseca quickly if flanked."
He made no effort to strike either Sherman's weakened force in front of Dalton or at the long Federal column slowly toiling southward across his front in the valley west of Rocky Face Ridge. But as the day progressed, evidence began to accumulate that something was up on the Federal side. After midnight, General Polk returned to Reseca to oversee the construction of a new defensive position. He did not have much time to complete that task. As evidence of a full-scale Federal move continued to mount, Johnston ordered the remainder of his army near Dalton to Reseca and the Oostenaula. By sunrise, not a Confederate was left on the northern half of Rocky Face Ridge or in Dalton itself. Johnston was off on what an opposing general called one of his clean retreats. Sherman, by now, was on the verge of completing the movement that prompted Johnston's pullout. With a day's head start, the Union Army should have beaten the main Confederate force to Reseca. But over 70,000 troops converging on narrow, meandering roads delayed the Federal march. By the time they reached their destination, the sun was too far gone for anything but a cavalry clash between Judson Kilpatrick and Joe Wheeler. Both men were generals at 28 years old. Each side took the measure of the other. Kilpatrick was unhorsed in the fray by a stray bullet. Luckily for the Union general, friendly troops managed to lug their badly wounded leader off the field and out of the war for several months. Sherman was neither daunted nor discouraged by his loss of the race to Reseca. Johnston was there, inviting an attack with his back to a river, and the fiery general aimed to oblige him. That evening, Sherman wired Major General Henry Halleck, the Federal General-in-Chief in Washington.
"Weather fine, troops in fine order, all is working well."
Informed that Grant had emerged from the wilderness and was now tangled with Lee at Spotsylvania, he added,
"Let us keep the ball rolling."
It rolled, but only a short distance in the course of a day-long fight. General Polk had made good use of his time in preparing the defensive line. McPherson, on the right of the Union line, scored what little gain there was by driving Polk's forward elements from some high ground west of the town. Elsewhere along the 4-mile curve of the rebel line, the ball either stopped or was repulsed. Thomas made no headway in the center, and Schofield took a terrible beating on the left when the Confederates in his front launched a sudden attack that drove him back nearly half a mile. General Johnston had been in excellent spirits all that day, riding from point to point along the line. A Tennessee private, seeing him, later recalled,
"The general is a small man, neatly turned out and genial in manner, fluffy white side whiskers framing the wedge-shaped face with its trim mustache and grizzled chin beard. Johnston sat his horse, head cocked to catch the swell of gunfire, left, and right, and center.
The general's good spirits lasted as night brought an end to the fighting and any chance of Hood pushing an attack on the Union right. That good mood did not last the night. While visiting Hood, Johnston received unwelcome reports from his scouts. First, a report came that the Union Corps left at Dalton had completed a forced march down the rail line to reinforce Schofield. Next, he learned that McPherson had brought artillery up onto the high ground lost by Polk during the day. These guns, armed with long-range shells, were able to reach both the railway and the turnpike bridges close behind his lines. The fire from these guns endangered his line of retreat and means of supply. Finally, a third bit of unwelcome news caused even more concern. Cavalry scouts reported that enemy units had crossed the Oostenaula, several miles downstream, in great strength. Morning brought a renewal of Federal pressure all along the line. Johnston held his ground until scouts again reported Union troops were across the river and had approached his escape route. Johnston ordered his forces to break contact and retreat down the turnpike. Sherman pressed on after the retiring Confederates, hoping to catch up with them before they had time to develop another defensive line. The first day's march ended at Calhoun, which was 6 miles down the track from Resaca. Not finding a favorable defensive position at Calhoun as he had hoped, Johnston continued his withdrawal. The Gray Army headed to Adairsville, 10 miles farther down the line. Sherman advanced on a broad front, since the country had become more open. It was a race to bag the Confederate Army. On the morning of May 18th, Rome, Georgia, which was undefended, fell to Generals Davis and Garrard. Rome's factories and ironworks were very important to the Southern cause, but the rail junction there was worth more, particularly since all of Johnston's reinforcements came by that route. Now that line was closed, except for Federal use. The footsore troops of General Johnston had 100,000 men in blue breathing down their back.